Chansey is the best and newest egg farmer in Pokemon Sleep. Yep, you heard that right. I said Chansey, not Blissey. Although there are some drawbacks of using Chansey instead of Blissey. Welcome back to another Pokemon Sleep video, it's Bro Vinny here. So before you evolve your Chansey, you gotta make sure you watch this video and you gotta think twice about whether it's worth evolving or not. There are some pros and cons of evolving Chansey or not, and we're gonna cover everything in this video. Not only that, Chansey comes with a really good skill, Energy for Everyone. For the first time ever, this skill is on a non-skill specialist. And in my opinion, it's much better than other healing skills like self-healing and so on. So the question now remains is, how are the stats? Are the stats good enough to use it as a skill production? Or for egg farming? Or perhaps for potato? First, let's take a look at the stats. Happiny is a baby Pokemon that is slumbering type. It is an ingredient specialist and it has a base frequency of 90 minutes, which is exceedingly slow. So if possible, you want to evolve it as soon as you can if you have a good one. But to evolve a Happiny, you will need an oval stone and 80 candies, and you can only do it in daytime. So that means you don't want to make a mistake investing because an oval stone isn't cheap. It's 1400 sleep points. And for some reason, this evolution takes 80 candies, and then for Chansey to evolve, it takes another 80 candies, one of the highest candy requirements for evolution. And in addition, for Chansey to evolve into Blissey, you will need 150 sleep hours on the Pokemon. So just your time and resource investment, you really don't want to make a mistake investing in the wrong one. Both Chansey and Blissey have about the same ingredient rate and skill trigger rate. While Happiny's base frequency is 90 minutes, Chansey's base frequency is 55 minutes, and Blissey's base frequency is 51 minutes 40 seconds. Blissey's base frequency is 6% faster than Chansey. Having a speed improvement is what we normally would expect on evolution. But the problem of only a 6% improvement on evolution is that if you don't evolve, having a goodnight ribbon on the prior evolutionary stage can sometimes actually improve the speed so much that it's worth more than the evolution itself. And that is true for Chansey's case, because Chansey's evolution only gave it a 6% boost, but when you have a 2000 hour goodnight ribbon on Chansey, it gets a 12% frequency boost. So provided that you're happy to sleep with Chansey for 2000 hours, Chansey is actually a faster Pokemon. It has a shorter frequency. Alright, so let's take a look at the numbers. Let's ignore Ribbon for a moment and just compare base Blissey to all the other existing egg farmers we have right now, and that's Delibird. That's a true mono egg farmer, but a rather expensive catch, so if possible, I'd avoid trying to catch a good Delibird, because it will just cost too much. Abomasnow, an excellent choice, but it's not a true mono. You'll have to unlock level 30 and 60 in order for it to be a really good egg farmer if you have the right stats as well, but at least it's going to be an easier hunt because it's only 5 bars to catch as a Snover. At level 60, using my usual comparison parameters, so everyone's at max energy, we're farming for 24 hours, no sleep. Abomasnow farms 67 eggs, Delibird farms 76 eggs, and Blissey farms 78 eggs. So Blissey beats Delibird by just a tiny bit. In other words, if you actually already have a really good Delibird, you don't really need Blissey for egg farming anyway. If you didn't have a really good egg farmer, either as an Abomasnow or Delibird, then Blissey is a really good choice because it's the best egg farmer. But what's even better than Blissey, let's take away Abomasnow and Delibird for a moment, is a Chansey with a ribbon. Now let's take a look at this Chansey without a ribbon. It farms about 5 to 6% less eggs than Blissey, because like I said, Blissey is about 6% faster than Chansey and they have approximately the same ingredient rate. So of course then it would farm about 6% more eggs. But if you give Chansey, say 500 hours slept, which for a Pokemon that can still evolve one time gets a free 5% boost, it would nearly match the egg output of Blissey, still a little less. In fact, it actually matches Delibird. But if we give it another 1500 hours slept, which gives you the max ribbon, Chansey's 12% speed boost now beats Blissey in terms of the egg output by about 6%. which you can see here. Chansey with a 2000 hour goodnight ribbon farms about 83 eggs, and Blissey at 78. Of course, Blissey's not affected by the goodnight ribbon being a fully evolved Pokemon. So before you evolve your Chansey into Blissey, you need to consider whether it's worth taking it to the 500 hours slept and then the 2000 hours slept. At 500 hours, it just about matches Blissey in the egg output, and then at 2000 hours, it beats Blissey for egg output. But before you take this as advice for choosing Chansey over Blissey, there are some major drawbacks for using Chansey instead. Number one, there is a loss of inventory of about 11. The reason why it says 28 here is because Goodnight Ribbon also gives you inventory. So if we were making a fair comparison, we actually need to give Goodnight Ribbon to Blissey as well. We'll give it 2000 hours of sleep. Well, now you can see that 11 inventory difference. Assuming that both are caught as happening, because every time you evolve, you get a free extra 5 inventory compared to the base inventory. So you lose 5 inventory because you didn't evolve it into Blissey, but also Blissey has a better base inventory that's 6 more than Chansey as well. And inventory can be quite useful for ingredient specialists, especially at a stage of the game where a lot of us are unlocking level 60 ingredients. They now take a big portion of the inventory. When you max out your inventory, the Pokemon no longer farms any more ingredient. And that can happen quite often overnight. If you're sleeping for 8 to 12 hours with your Chansey because you're trying to get it to evolve, or maybe you're trying to get the ribbon, you're actually losing 11 inventory worth of eggs or other productions every night. Perhaps this wouldn't be a problem if your Chansey has inventory L to begin with, but regardless, it's a drawback of using Chansey over Blissey. The second issue is, of course, you lose 1 main skill level. If you can compensate for it by investing in a main skill seed, that might not be an issue. But then we'll have to ask whether it's going to be worth using your main skill seed on an ingredient specialist, which we'll cover in a moment when we get to the skill part of this video. Regardless, I'd say because of the skill level loss, and actually it's a good skill to have, and the inventory loss, it may not be worth keeping your Chansey as a Chansey over evolving it into Blissey. It's not like you have to decide right away anyway. Even if you catch a really good Happiny, you'll still need to sleep with Chansey for 150 hours before you can evolve it into Blissey. It's just that at that point, you ask yourself, should I now evolve it into Blissey? Or now that I've already invested 150 sleep hours, why not keep going and go for the 500 hours to have it match Blissey, and then eventually at 2000 hours have it beat Blissey? I'm assuming that the meta doesn't change in the future. Maybe after 2000 hours, everything's changed and Chansey is no longer the best egg farmer anyway. So there are some risks that you have to take if you're going to take the Chansey path. And on top of all of this, you actually have a little bit more time to hunt a good Chansey anyway, because, well, we don't really need eggs right now if we're talking about the endgame dishes. During Chansey's debut week, that is the Spring Festival, where 2 new salads got released, both those salads are actually worse than our previous best salad. Not by much, but it is worse. Apple Acid Yogurt Dressed Salad gives you 19,000 base strength, whereas Defiant Coffee Salad gives you 20,000 strength. Now you might say that's only a small difference, why don't I just cook whichever is better for me to farm those ingredients? Yes, you can, but the main issue I have with Apple Acid Salad is that a level 7 cooking power up trigger, a single trigger, still isn't enough space to cook all the ingredients needed for this dish. So if I've got 69 base pot, which is the current pot size, max pot size, plus a level 7 cooking power up, that is still less than what's required, whereas it gives you exactly enough pot size with 1 trigger to cook a Defiant Coffee Dressed Salad. So yes, if we do see a level 8 cooking power up, or maybe a further expansion of the pot size, then Apple Acid could look a little better. But right now, without Good Camp Ticket, you actually need 2 triggers at minimum of cooking power up to get Apple Acid Salad. Petal Blizzard is actually not too bad because it's exactly 69 ingredients, which is the current pot size. You don't need to use cooking power up. You can spend that time farming ingredients or berries, etc. So I'm actually more pleased with the Petal Blizzard Layered Salad being introduced, which is the top dish for 69 or below pot size, than Apple Acid Salad. which isn't even a top dish and requires 2 triggers. But of course, that's not to say that you shouldn't get an egg farmer, because eventually we're going to need eggs for something at some point, maybe a new recipe. And in the curry section, there's no top dish that uses egg. For desserts, we do have one dish, but it's not quite as powerful as the 2 other dishes above it. So there you have it. For eggs, Chansey is technically the best egg farmer if we put ideal stats in. If we're collecting every production and not worrying about inventory, Chansey is the best. But put other factors in like inventory, main skill level, Blissey actually is still quite good, and I would actually suggest free-to-play players to go more for Blissey, especially if you don't log in very much. The inventory will be quite helpful to you. Or perhaps your decision of whether Chansey or Blissey is the right choice is based on, well, whether your Happiny or your best Happiny has inventory. If it has inventory, maybe Chansey is a good choice. If it doesn't have any inventory at all and you're purely relying on the base inventory plus some ribbon inventory, then you probably want to go for Blissey instead, because you get an extra 11 inventory. Okay, so let's say you've got eggs sorted. Maybe you already had a really good Delibird, or like me, you have a really good Abomasnow for eggs. You don't really want a Chansey for eggs. Are there other things that Chansey can do? Well, the other ingredient that Chansey can farm is potatoes. So let's take a look at how Chansey compares in potatoes. With an ABB ingredient list for potatoes, Chansey farms about 61 potatoes, which is about the same as Victory Bell for potatoes at level 60. A max ribbon Chansey farms 65 potatoes, which is about the same as a Golem, but neither of which beat the true mono potato farmer, and that's Meowscarada. So in terms of potato, still Meowscarada is the best. If for some strange reason you don't have a potato farmer, you don't have a good Meowscarada, Victory Bell, or potato golem, and you happen to have eggs sorted, maybe you have got a mono Delibird already, then maybe you can consider hunting a Happiny that's for potatoes. But I personally would avoid that because there's just a lot more potato farmers than there are egg farmers. So I would still prefer to have another egg option than to try and compete for potato farming with all the other options already available. I mean, if we were to be absolutely complete, there's all of these other options for potato as well. Not that they're necessarily good options for potatoes, but they are there. They are options. So there's just going to be more potato options than egg options. So I would still rather have Chansey's line focus on eggs than potatoes. How about for berries? We don't actually have a lot of great options for normal type berry farmers. So can Chansey help us farm normal type berries? Is it fast enough? Can it be what we sometimes call a dual specialist, where if it has berry finding S, it farms so much berries that it's almost like a berry specialist? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no. So let's take a look at the numbers. Looking at only the person berry output, without any ribbons, Holiday Eevee comes out on top, being a true berry specialist, and it's more than double that of Blissey. So naturally, if we give them berry finding S, Holiday Eevee is more than 1.5 times the amount of berry production than Blissey. So Blissey with berry finding S isn't going to be that great. You should comparatively use Holiday Eevee instead. But of course, Holiday Eevee is a limited time thing. You might not have one or might not have a good one. Then Raticate is your second choice. And Raticate still beats out Blissey more than 3-2, so you just wouldn't use Blissey for berry finding. You would focus on Raticate having berry finding, focus Blissey on having ingredient finding instead. But what if we look at Chansey? Because we just said that Chansey is faster than Blissey if we give a 2k ribbon, the max ribbon. But if we now look at max ribbon, Vigoroth is actually the king of person berries, which we already knew when ribbons first came out. Vigoroth was the main power creep. Vigoroth was always a better berry farmer than Slarking, but with a 2k ribbon, it's even better. Compare that to Chansey. At 115 berries, it is more than double that of Chansey's berry output, even with a 2k ribbon. So once again, that just means that even with berry finding, you're going to see Vigoroth farming more than 1.5 times of Chansey's berry output. So I'm not saying berry finding is a bad thing, it's just not the focus for the Chansey line. And it doesn't really help you that much more than using a true berry specialist. So that leaves us with only one question left. Yep, Chansey and Blissey is going to be the preferred egg farmer, but what's going on with its skill? Energy for everyone, that's a great skill. How does it compare in trigger rate to our current best? energy for everyone healer, and that is a skill specialist Gardevoir. Well, Gardevoir at 4.11 triggers using these parameters, so base stats only a max energy. In 24 hours gives you 4.1 triggers per day, whereas Blissey only gives you 1.9. With a max ribbon Chansey, 2.05. So Chansey and Blissey are both going to underperform on that skill. You'll still want to have a good Gardevoir regardless, but having a Blissey or Chansey on the team means you need to spend less time with a Gardevoir, and then you can swap in something else to farm your berries or your ingredients. So this is still a very welcomed skill. In fact, if every single berry and ingredient specialists have energy for everyone, we wouldn't even need Gardevoir. We'd just be over healing all day. So this is a powerful skill, even though it is only farming at half the rate as Gardevoir. The main catch is that, well, you're not going to use Chansey or Blissey when you don't need eggs. Whereas Gardevoir can be used anywhere, anytime to help maintain your team energy. So when you do have Chansey Blissey on the team for eggs, maybe farming for some salad dishes, then at a certain energy, you just swap out Gardevoir and have something else come in to farm instead. Of course, this argument doesn't really work considering you might not want to put main skill seeds into your Chansey or Blissey, since you can't use them all the time, so you're not really going to see a return in your investment. You're just not going to be using it unless you're farming eggs. So if you have other things that you might need your main skill seeds for, like Tasty Chance, Cooking Power Up, maybe a Gardevoir, those things are going to see better return of value than trying to invest your main skill seeds in a Blissey. And given that means that skill level up M is a really good skill for Chansey or Blissey compared to skill trigger M. And I hope you understand that point. If you don't, let me know in the comments section below. Regardless, your focus is still getting an ingredient focus Chansey or Blissey, and if you happen to have skill level up, that's a positive. Let me know what you guys think of Chansey versus Blissey. Will you evolve it into Blissey or will you leave it as a Chansey? Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.